When it comes to fan websites, they really don't get much better than Fantha Tracks. The site is one that we've been using here at Tatooine Sons for the entire history of the show to find the best Star Wars news out there. I am so excited to be joined this week by the genius behind the site. I call him Mr. Fantha Tracks, Mark Newbold. Mark is here to help us take a look back on the history of Star Wars so that we can look forward to what's coming in 2022. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody listen to that.
Welcome to Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast to name an official Star Wars creature and be endorsed by the writer-director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, in that there is a story written on our souls. These myths speak to that story. And that is why I am honored to be joined this week by Mark Newbold. Mark was first caught up in the Star Wars tractor beam all the way back in 1997 when it all started. And he has been involved in running websites about a galaxy far, far away since 1994. He's the editor-in-chief of Fantha Tracks, one of the best Star Wars news and opinion websites out there. He is a frequent writer for StarWars.com and other print and online magazines, including Star Wars Insider and Build the Millennium Falcon, Starburst, and Star Trek, the official magazine, which then proves that you can be a Star Trek and a Star Wars fan at the same time. He is a proud honorary friend of the 501st and the Rebel Legion. As Mark and I started our conversation, we began discussing how 2022 could become the year of Star Wars, even though there won't be any theatrical releases this year. And I wondered if this is the year where we decisively answer the question of whether Star Wars will endure as a major franchise like Marvel.
Wow. I mean, that's the benchmark, isn't it? Marvel. I mean, they've got that motor ticking so nicely. I think I did a review on the site recently of Star Wars Year by Year, and it made you realise when you look back just how much content there's been, even in the Disney era, you know, just that 5-year span that the new book covers. But next year really could be quite ridiculous in a good way. In a positive way. Obviously, we've got Andor, we've got Obi-Wan, we've got Season 2 Bad Batch, maybe Season 3 Mando, who knows? We've got the rest of Book of Boba Fett. Hopefully we'll get some announcements. We've got a celebration. I think Star Wars is hopefully, good point. I think Star Wars, in a way, is sort of past the point of thinking that it's going to come to a halt. Unlike Star Trek, for example, which has always sort of ebbed and flowed, and is on a definite high at the moment in terms of the output, certainly. I think Star Wars is pretty solid. You know, the publishing campaign's going really well, comics and books, Insiders bobbling along nicely, thank goodness. You know, there's plenty of other things going along with it as well. I think it's in a good spot, and it feels like it's capturing a broader audience as well. Us niche people, not that niche, but, you know, us guys who are really deep into it are invested as much as we're ever going to be. It just feels like there's new people coming in. The parks help as well. So yeah, I think we're going to be okay, he said, crossing his fingers. Good for podcasting.
Yeah, awesome. Well, so you mentioned a lot of the different titles that are coming out this year. Of all those new titles, which one is the one you're most excited about, and why?
I've been saying it since they first announced it because I adore Rogue One, and Diego Luna was my favourite thing in it. So it's definitely Andor. I mean, I'm stoked for Obi-Wan, of course. Who's not going to be? Even if your focus isn't the prequels, because it's Ewan. Obi-Wan was one of the original characters from the original film. He's an OT guy as well. So I think he captures a lot of areas. You're either looking back at where he's come from, or you're looking forward to where it connects to. So that captures a lot of hearts in all directions. Bad Batch really blew me away in a way I didn't expect it to. I thought that was going to be quite linear and obvious, and it wasn't. So that was a really pleasant surprise. But Andor's the one. Just that run. I say this a lot. That run up to Scarif and Yavin. And it's funny how I always say Scarif and Yavin now, and for years we just said Yavin. But that run up to that period of time when you're getting the Alliance in the place where they can sort of establish themselves and make a stand and be a proper opposition, I think could be fascinating.
We are really big Rebels fans here at Tatooine Sons. It's how the Sons got into Star Wars originally. What are the chances from, this is obviously all speculation and just kind of hopes, but the idea of you talk Scarif and Yavin and we have that tiniest glimpse of Ghost. We have the tiniest little moment with Chopper. We hear about General Syndulla. Do we finally get some live action Hera Syndulla or something like that in that? Do you think that's a possibility?
In the sense that right now, as a comparison, in Book of Boba Fett, we're seeing certain characters from the comics. I won't say too much because in case people haven't seen it, but there's characters from the comics that's come into the episode briefly. There's lots of nods to various eras of Star Wars. I think Andor makes so much sense because within the ballpark of Andor, of course, you've got Rogue One, which is running up to, but you've got Solo not that far behind it. So there's options there. You've got Obi-Wan within a handful of years around it as well. Of course, Rebels. So, yes, I think if anywhere, that's the place it will happen. And I don't know which character it would be. It could be a bad guy as well. It could not necessarily be any of the good guys, but I think there's going to be Rebels overlaps. It makes sense to pull them in because they were a cell, weren't they? They were one of the cells that sort of coalesced into the larger union. So I think it could happen, yeah. Be a good one to see.
I'd love to see Andor and Syndulla and maybe even, just any of them live action. But I think it'd be super cool to see a live action Zeb, just to see that character play.
Yeah. And we need a Fulcrum get together, don't we?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get all three of the, get every one of the Fulcrums together, right?
That's it.
You've got Ahsoka, and you've got
is a Bail Organa a Fulcrum as well?
No, I'm trying to think. It's what's the oh my gosh, he's the Imperial traitor in Rebels, and now I can't remember.
Callus, Agent Callus, yeah.
What his name is?
Callus,
yeah. So let's get all three of those guys together with it. That'd be a lot of fun. So, Mark, the Disney era of Star Wars has had a few ups and downs with it, and not because of the content necessarily, but because of the reaction with it and sort of the narrative that's been around it. What's been, let's talk about it from a light side perspective first. What's been the most exciting thing of this Disney era of Star Wars for you as someone that has been around Star Wars for as long?
There's a lot of optimism, which I like. I like the fact that there's younger fans coming in because Star Wars has always needed that. Because I think because a lot of us came in at a certain point of time, around a certain age, I think naturally, especially when it did go quieter for a while and other franchises were sort of prominent above it until it came back big time in the early 90s, which sounds ridiculous. That's 30 years ago. But there has been periods when it's been not sort of at the peak of the zeitgeist, always on it, but never at the peak at the time. I think there's an inclination to feel like I'm going to say we because I was part of that generation, I guess, like we kind of owned it. When you're down to your major Star Wars adventures are with a dice and a piece of paper playing West End game Star Wars or early LucasArts games, it's you on your own. You're not interacting. There wasn't no multi-online games. You couldn't be sharing it with people around the world. It was kind of yours. And a lot of people did leave it and come back, which is understandable because life, But now there's all these new people coming in, which is great. New adventures, expanding the storylines. it feels very positive, and also the fact that now I've got no doubt that, especially at my age, Star Wars is going to outlive me. At one point, I wasn't 100% sure it would. Maybe in 100 years somebody will pick it up and do something with it, but why would you? Because other things happen. But now I think Star Wars is just going to keep rolling for decades. So that's the big positive for me, I think.
That's awesome. So with the good, we have to address the bad. There's balance here with the dark and the light here. So What's been the most disappointing part of this era for you?
And it's the flip side of the same coin. It's people who I think love Star Wars in their own way. They have an ownership of it. And if Star Wars didn't give you that sense of ownership, people would walk away from it a lot easier than they do. People feel like I'm holding my hands to my chest. It's not very good for podcasting, but people love it because it's theirs and there's a personal connection to it. They've got memories and so on and so forth. But I think sometimes that ownership, which I think people call gatekeeping now to a degree, can almost get lost. It's not seeing the wood for the trees. It's, we all came in together, and then people came in through Empire, through Jedi, through droids, through Ewoks, and all the other things that happened back in the day, 80s Lucasfilm. And then the prequels came along, and there was a schism there. And now you've got this current era. I keep wanting to say new, but it's 10 years in October since Disney bought Lucasfilm. It's insane. I can't believe it's 10 years. It still feels like it's just happened. But, there's another schism there. And I think it's people who all have a great love for Star Wars, but they just can't kind of step to one side and let this new run happen. And I do get it, because some stuff, you've not got the same people marshalling it. You've not got the same people organising it. It's a totally different team of people. There's very few who were around then who are around now. And even then, it's kind of, let's bring, I don't know, pick a name. Let's bring Phil Tippett back to do the chessboard scene in Solo because it's Phil Tippett, He had a much deeper involvement in Jedi than he did in Solo. That's a weird example, but I think you get what I'm getting at. It's a totally different crew of people. I don't think they love Star Wars any less. It's just that when those guys were making Star Wars before, they were just head down, making the films. The authors were head down writing the books. There wasn't this legend of Star Wars. And Star Wars has become so iconic, certain characters, situations. I mean, Empire Strikes Back, how many years has that been voted one of the greatest movies ever? It's always in the conversation. So massive hurdles to sort of clear if you want to make a new Star Wars film legendary and part of that. I think the one film of the current era that's done that personally is Rogue One. I think that's seen very highly by an awful lot of people. But we're in a television era of Star Wars now as well. So it's going on both levels. I'm excited, but I'm not saying I have sympathy, but I do kind of understand where some people have a gripe. Not that I agree with it. I mean, from why they would want to feel that way, because I think they love it as much as others do, but just in a different way. And that's life, though, isn't it? It causes these issues. So sadly, it encroaches on our safe space of Star Wars.
How does Lucasfilm and Disney regain the confidence of the movie-going public following some of the starts and the stops and the misses and kind of the confusion between films that some fans feel like you see between, especially in the trilogy there?
That's a tough one. And you started off by mentioning Marvel, which I think these days, he's always mentioned Star Wars and Star Trek, and then Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and other franchises, and that's fair in the moment, but I think today you've got to compare it to Marvel. And Marvel are just smashing it. They're king on the screen, big screen. They're ruling the small screen, and all these stories interconnect in a beautiful way. We're starting to see it to a smaller degree with Book of Boba Fett, but that's not hooking into a film that's coming out. Marvel are linking into films that are coming, films that are just out. They're just perfect. Star Wars kind of wants to get to that situation, but I've said it for years, you can't compare Star Wars to Marvel because you can have the Avengers and every single one of those characters can go off and have their own film. You couldn't necessarily have a crew of Star Wars characters together like a team of superheroes and give each of them their own film or TV series. It doesn't quite work like that. They're not built like that. So to get the confidence back, I don't know. I mean, part of you thinks, let's drag George out of retirement against his better judgment. happily having a well-earned retirement wherever he is at the moment. Drag him from the coffee shop and say, George, you're making a trilogy. If he made another trilogy, he would want to do something different. He wouldn't want to retread old ground. He wouldn't do something new. Half of Star Wars fandom is happy with the familiarity of what's gone before, and half of it wants something new. I see you've got a Last Jedi poster behind you. That is the perfect example. Half of the audience loved it because it was something fresh and new, and half of the audience hated it because it was something fresh and new. And that's that schism, isn't it? So I think to get the confidence back, partly they need to touch on the familiar, which is why Mando works so well, Book of Boba Fett is working well. But they've also got to strike out into some new ground. Where that is, I don't know. I think you need to step away a little bit from Jedi versus Sith, which is what Mando was doing, but kind of changed at the end of season 2. Certainly so far what Fett's doing, but that might change. They're all staples of Star Wars, but I think maybe just something a little bit different, but not too different.
Yeah. It's definitely
that answer made no sense.
It's fine. It's here in the U.S. we've got this idea of the armchair quarterback, the guy that knows exactly what the team should have done on Sunday, and it's really easy on Monday to make all of those judgments. But when you're in the midst of it and you're dealing with a franchise that is as loved as it is and is as loaded with different ideas and stories and themes, and you're trying to figure it out. I know you're familiar with Pete Fletcher over at Around the Galaxy podcast, and I love the way that Pete. I heard him describe it once. He said that when it comes to the sequel trilogy, you've got JJ, who's a Star Wars movie fan, and you've got Ryan, who is a Star Wars fan. And it's like the greater lore and everything in the background of it as well. And so both of them are coming from a position of absolutely loving this franchise, but they're coming up with very different interpretations of it. And it's a real challenge.
Yeah. And it was weird to try and put those two together. They didn't quite, because their sensibilities were so different, but both 100% Star Wars guys. It was a weird connection to put the two together. Yeah.
And it worked on some levels. And then I think a lot of us are willing to admit that in other levels, it didn't really work as well as we had hoped it would have. But
that's a great point. You make a great point, because I know we're going off topic here, but I always go off topic.
No, it's good.
I'll forgive myself. I think with Star Wars, you look at the original trilogy and it had 3 different directors. And I think that worked really, really well. And then look at the prequel trilogy, and it was just George, and that worked really, really well. So it's difficult to know which way to pitch it, but I think having one guy direct episodes 1 and 3 and somebody else direct episode 2, if you were to put it into those terms, 7 and 9 and 8, maybe didn't quite work because the baton's being passed at high speed, and I kind of wish either JJ had directed all 3 or somebody else directed 9 and just give them their own flavour, because 7 and 8 are so different. Connected but so different, but then 7 feels like 9 and feels like 7. So
as Mark was talking about how episodes 4, 5, and 6 all had different directors, but episodes 1, 2, and 3 were only directed by George, I couldn't help but think about how the major story difference between the original and prequel trilogies and the sequel trilogy was that the sequels didn't have one person guiding the overarching story throughout all of the films. The biggest criticism of the sequels is that the films seem like puzzle pieces that just don't quite fit together as seamlessly as they should. My interview with Mark will continue in just a moment, but I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Cufflinks.com. If you're not familiar with Cufflinks.com, all you need to know is that they have over 3,000 items, including cufflinks, ties, tie bars, and socks from all of the fandoms that you love. We love Cufflinks.com because they're family owned and they're run by a couple of brothers who geek out about Star Wars as much as we do. And they have stuff from all of those franchises, Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, DC, Lord of the Rings, all of that. If you want to help the show out and look great doing it, head on over to Cufflinks.com, take a look at everything it has to offer. Be sure you use the code Tatooine15 at checkout and you will receive 15% off of your entire order. And you might not know this, but Mark is a big-time Star Trek fan, and he should definitely go where no one has gone before and get some amazing ties, cufflinks. Well, other people have gone there before. But anyway, get some amazing ties, cufflinks, and other accessories from cufflinks.com. Mark has been around Star Wars and been a content creator since before the prequels were even released. We've only been doing this for a little over 4 years now, but we've definitely learned that it's sometimes very hard finding that balance between being a fan and a creator. I asked Mark how he does it.
That's a really good question. And this conversation has come up before. And I have to be careful because obviously I write for Insider and StarWars.com, and so to a degree I have to temper what I say sometimes. I'd like to think I'm a positive guy. So if I've something not nice to say, I tend to keep it to myself. But if it's something I want to really go for, I'll praise it to the high heavens. But I do have to be careful. But yeah, fan first always. I think there's enough good stuff going on. There's enough news out there. I mean, I'm based in the UK, so there's always conventions going on. There's always people to speak to. I've said this again. Even if Disney hadn't bought Lucasfilm, and let's say Lucasfilm had finished Clone Wars back when they did, we might have got another Clone Wars series spin-off. We might have got something else happen. I don't think George would have made a film, but I think Lucasfilm might have done further stuff. But nothing to the level that's happening now, because there would have still been an independent company. Yeah, if you do the sliding doors thing and think, well, if George had not sold Lucasfilm and just left it to the team, he might have, instead of leaving $1 billion to the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, he might have left $1 billion to Lucasfilm to say, keep this thing ticking over for the next 10 years or whatever. I'm picking numbers. I just think life would have been a little bit different. We'd have still had content, but Star Wars is so rich. I could have still been talking to guys about a Star Wars weekly that came out in the UK back in 1984 and known that there's content, maybe not to the level of interest worldwide that the current news has on Fantha Tracks, but it would have justified me being a fan and creating content, which I think is your question. So it is a tricky balance. And sometimes on a quiet news day, and I'll hold my hand up and say I've made poor judgment more than once by picking on news articles from sites that haven't got the best reputation and I've not known, I've not realised, I'm just pulling news in, or I've put a piece on the site where someone's come along and gone, not actually true, and I've had to go back and walk it back a little bit and correct it. Not too proud to admit I've made some errors in those respects, but generally I think you've got to be the fan. I'd like to think, I don't know how much any of your readers read Fantha Tracks, but I'd like to think if you read my content, you'll know that I'm writing about this from a place of interest, place of fondness. Generally, I want this all to work and be good. So that's the heart of it, really. I think if you lose the fun of it and you lose the interest, even a little bit, it starts to become a chore. And there is a lot of, doing what I do, posting on the site especially, I think I've barely missed a day in the last 10 years. Even on holiday, to my wife's annoyance, I take the laptop, I still post when I'm on holiday. We've got a holiday coming, it could be March, hopefully, if things stay the same, and I know I'm going to be posting on holiday, so if there's a Wi-Fi signal, I'll post. But there is a bit of donkey work and just keeping it going.
Has there ever been a time when you just thought, you know what, I wish I could just go back to being a fan, so I could see Star Wars from that perspective versus the perspective of the content creator, thinking I've got to put out more content and all that?
Because I've also written for Star Trek, official Star Trek website and magazine as well, and I love Trek very much, and it's probably 60-40 in the favour of Star Wars. And with Trek, what I have tended to do is take a little bit of a backseat on writing and posting about Trek, just to enjoy it as a fan, exactly what you said, because I think I'm at the point now with Star Wars, I know myself well enough, my wife knows, that if I have an instance where, I don't know, the Wi-Fi's down, or I can't get a signal, or I can't post something, or I just can't if there's a day when it's like 11:30 at night and nothing's gone on Fantha Tracks, I'm like this, I'm chewing my fingers to the bone, because if nobody else can get online to post, I've got to do it. So I'd get up at 2 a.m. to do it if I had to. So there is a bit of a weird compulsion to do it. But no, I think I'm so proud of the sites I've done. I did a site called Lightsaber for 10 years, and then I did Jedi News for 7, and now Fantha Tracks. all of them I've put as much as I really possibly can into it. And hopefully Phantom Tracks is like my forever home, he says, waggling his air quotes. So, I'd like to think this will be the last site that I do Star Wars, but, things happen. But hopefully this is the one that will stick. Day doesn't feel complete if I haven't posted something to the site or written something or done a podcast, or I'm editing something at the moment for Making Tracks.
Every time we have somebody that's Star Wars on the show, we love to end with this question. For you, how does Star Wars inspire hope?
Oh, that's a great question. How does it inspire hope? I mean, there's so many things within the story that you can take away. And I sometimes feel guilty because I do watch Star Wars very much with my blockbuster head on. I want it to wash over me. I want to be impressed by it visually. I want to love the music because I know I'm going to play it forever when I'm writing stuff on the site. And I think with Star Wars, I don't overtly dive into the message because there's generally some sort of message or moral, but it's not written. I make the Star Trek comparison. Star Wars and Star Trek have been different in that Star Trek's always had that moral element. It is trying to tell you something. Star Wars isn't necessarily overtly trying to do that. It's trying to weave you through a story. But there's always a takeaway from Star Wars, and generally with me, it hits me way later when I'm sitting in the car just thinking through what I've seen. It's like, okay, actually, that's quite clever. So in terms of hope, this is a really good question. I've never thought of it quite in those terms. I think the hope that we'll get some more, which is always a good thing because it's my happy place, and that's what the last 10 years has definitely done for us. But there's so much. I mean, seeing other people, everybody, when you say the word hope, you think of Carrie. I think that's the big connector of the people. And I think certainly since her passing, it's kind of been inflated slightly. And I understand that. But by the same token, when I see people take so much from that in a positive way, and I think this is somebody watching the same things I'm watching. We're all different. We've all got different upbringings. We're all wired differently. We all see different things. I love the thought that Star Wars and a character, and it by extension the actress behind that character or any other character, can make people feel so good, can give them the inspiration to go and do things, push on, get in a career, have it as their safe space to fall back on when things get tough, which it certainly has been for me over the years. So I would say, yeah, that's a lousy answer that waffles way too much, but I think that's kind of what it is. I think just knowing it's there and it's there for you, and you take what you want out of it.
I'll never forget sitting in a darkened theater on a Friday afternoon in December of 2016, watching the previews before our third viewing of Rogue One, when I saw on social media that Carrie Fisher had suffered a massive heart attack. We were actually in that very same theater just days later when Carrie passed away. I agree with Mark that the idea of hope being connected to Star Wars will never be the same after that. I want to thank Mark for joining me this week. Make sure you check out phantomtracks.com. It's where you can find some of the best Star Wars content in the galaxy. And thank you for listening to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. If you enjoyed this interview, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app of choice. Follow the show, subscribe to it on your app so you don't miss any of what we've got going on in the future. Our next episode releases on Tuesday. We'll actually spend some time reacting to Fennec Shand and those revelations about her and Boba Fett in Chapter 4 of The Mandalorian. And then we'll continue our conversation about Superman and Lois as we review Season 2, Episode 2. And then it's going to be fun to break down the similarities and the differences between the comics version of Moon Knight and the version that it appears that we're getting in the MCU after that trailer that dropped earlier this week. Make sure you follow the show so you don't miss any of it. While you're at it, follow Tatooine Sons on Facebook and Twitter and share this episode with somebody else. It's how you help the show grow. We would greatly appreciate that. I think that's going to do it for today. There's only one thing left to say.
May the Force be with you always.
This party's over.
like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Join, please.